starting off with the most basic question: what are ghosts?
Okay, that is okay. That's what is so funny. They're like the Milky Way. That's what they kept on saying. How
Hmm.
funny. I've never seen it that way.
Hmm.
They're saying, okay, okay, they're flashing also. So they're showing it as they say a profile. So a ghost is you, like your energy body. And they're saying, like, if you were to look at your vortex, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. They're saying, like, if you were to look at your vortex, it's kind of like your profile. You know, like
Hmm.
those when those old time black pieces, and you do it in chalk of the profile. That's
Hmm.
what they're basically saying. But they're saying it's you. It's just you, not embodied. You're nobody. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
but you're everybody at the same sense. They are saying it's just so we, meaning us in humans in body, can see them. So
Hmm.
ghosts are just everybody who doesn't have a body. So it's like nobody, you know. There's a, well, let me see if I could get it. Hold on. So I don't know if this might be backwards. Oh yeah, it'll be backwards, but I'll show a picture on it
No,
later. But
actually, on my screen, I could read it.
oh, you could. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is my business card. It's a magnet, of course, because I was like, "Ooh, I want it magnetic." But
Yes.
anyway, it basically is a cartoon that I drew, and it says, "My house, my rules. I can't see you either. Transitions are hard. Can you hear me now? Ghosts are people too. That's like the thing of ghosts are people too. E equals MC squared one." So it's like, woohoo, energy one. And then you go to the light. Because I have a
Hmm.
big problem with people who are, and I might get in trouble saying this. And just like, just remember everybody, all the viewers, this is coming from my perspective. It's not, there's no, this is it, or this is the reasoning, or that, this is just coming from my perspective. From my experience also of I've been doing this for 25 years plus actually. So I definitely have experience in this, but um ghosts, when people say like go to the light or stuff like that, I feel like that's very arrogant. I
Hmm.
feel like even though they're trying to help and so forth, and I love that. I think that's a beautiful thing. I feel like it's arrogant in the sense that they're viewing it as there's something wrong here, or that they're trapped.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's more like you're just picking up on it. You know what I'm saying? You're
Hmm.
privileged to understand it and hear it and learn it. They're just fine, being able to cross that line. Guess what? How about applaud them that they can show up and cross that veil? Like,
Yeah.
has anybody brought cookies for these ghosts and been like, good job? Like, dude, I want to be one of you. But if someone tells me to go to the light, yeah, I'm going to smack a lamp across them. Like,
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
tell me to do things. So, and then there are people like, oh, well, they're angry, or they're just, they're trapped. It's like, well, if they are angry, maybe that's them working it out. I don't believe
Hmm.
that there's trapness.
Hmm.
It's just like how when I was in that void, I wasn't in heaven. I wasn't in like the light of like, oh, and I remember when I was in that near death experience of that void or that blackness, whatever,
Hmm.
which I feel like was heaven, but it was like everything. But I do feel like it wasn't in between, because I remember asking God or whatever it, and I remember asking it, and I said, "What's over there?" And it was, there's this plane, and it went down like that. And I don't know
Hmm.
if I talked about this before, but and I got, no, you're not allowed to go there. And of course, I'm like, I want to go there. Like I was like, I was definitely 15 years old. Like, and I remember thinking, like, why couldn't I go there? And I remember, and it was like whatever I thought immediately answered. And it was because that was it. Like that was the end of Vanessa's life.
Hmm.
And so I was very strongly instructed, I'm not allowed to go in that direction. But
Hmm.
I, I felt that pull of like, because it was love. It was like, I was feeling the enormous love that I can't even bring to earth and explain to you. But then this was like even more. Like, how could there
Hmm.
be more? It was like that. So, ghosts, I feel like, are just literally, it's not that they're in that the reason why I'm talking about this in between, so we have a there, we'll call it heaven, and then we have the place that I was in, and I do feel like it was kind of an in between, but it's not like a waiting room. It's not like I'm like, okay, when is
Yeah.
the doctor gonna come in? It was more um just like a place of uh an experiential Disneyland in a way,
Mm,
and um it was interesting that there was more. That really fascinated me.
mm,
But I feel like ghosts are more like jumpers. So it's not necessarily that they have to go. If anything, when you see psychics being like, okay, we released him or whatever, they definitely might have helped open more doors, because might be energies that might be stuck, but they're working on it. Like it's
mm.
enough. You know what I'm saying? Like I just feel like it's very kind of cocky to think that we know anything,
Right.
like
And
instead of
I think
being like,
we get a lot of our ideas. When I say we, I mean me, from movies, right? Like, and I think about, the importance of the stories that we tell, right? So for millennia, we've been sharing wisdom through our stories, in our groups and our families. And then as we now have switched to storytelling as pure entertainment, and sometimes I would even say trash. Um,
yeah, yeah,
these concepts, storytelling is still very important to us, and it's how we take in and start to understand the world. But these facts, or these ideas, sometimes are even silly. I think they take seat, and so we just and then people follow suit along that chain, and we just assume, oh, they must be trash, right? Because
yeah,
how many really compelling good movies have we seen where they're like, they're in between this place, and it's clearly not where they want to be. So it makes sense. I think there's something reassuring for me to know that they're just working through it, just like we are. They're finding their way, and we don't have to do anything. We don't have to try and help them. We don't have to tell them what to do. I think it's a cool concept, because that is not the message I've gotten my whole life from TV and movies. So,
yeah.
um,
I mean, who has? I mean, the
right,
Ghostbusters. It's like anything that has
right,
like I remember Poltergeist. That was like the first movie I ever
yes,
saw. What, like my grandmother brought us to the theater to see that. I was 5 to see. I'm shocked I do my job now. Like no wonder why I
yeah,
don't do like, any ghost stuff or
yeah,
demon ever clearing. I'm like I was scared to bits about that.
yeah. That was a legitimately terrifying movie.
Yeah,
It was good, but it was scary. I
and
watched
like
it
the
recently, and it
pool.
totally holds. Oh, and the little clown. It's just,
Ah!
yeah. I don't know if there's anything psychic. Maybe we just have a session, just on like a whole podcast, just episode just on clown stuff. Like have people send
Oh,
all the clown questions, because
yes.
there is a wonderful um, documentary on Netflix. I forget the name of it because it just came off the top of my head, but it's just the history of clowns, right? And talking about where they started, how they kind of where they fit into society, into like in our general psyche over the decades and centuries, and then kind of where we are now, and how
Yeah.
some things there's a lot of continuity, and how someone said there was never such thing as a happy fun clown. They were always scary, they're always mischievous, right? There's mystery, there was something there. So anyway, and then in the 80s I feel like they really leaned into it and got us good. So
Totally.
oh,
Totally. They're like, we got to
um
make money on this.
yeah. So yeah, I think the thing about ghosts, you did say something I wanted to ask a follow-up question about, and you said, so it is our energetic bodies without our physical bodies. You said we're us, but we're also everybody. Is that because in that form we're also part of the collective conscience?
Yes.
Or
Because I feel
how,
like
and
there's
what's
just
is
no
there a
time.
percentage? Am I still like 55% me, or is it, I know that's silly, right? But it's
I
like,
keep on showing.
if
No, I love this.
right, because it's like, if it's my form, and there's in a form of intelligence, right? Like perhaps, then how much is it really? And I know on Earth probably we're making like these distinctions that probably don't exist, but I guess for me, I'm like, if I'm a ghost, like, and I'm still part of the collective conscious, am I just more aware of it all, or is it somehow like almost like am I like diluted by everything else?
your boundaries are. So your
Oh,
boundaries are diluted. So
oh,
it's like
interesting.
you
Okay.
don't have boundaries. So it's so fascinating that they're showing it of like how they show it to us of a ghost of the
Right.
profile, which
Yeah.
is like fascinating because it's always light. Like anytime people see a ghost, they're going to actually see this like this aura, but it's like the profile aura, and then it's like wafy and smoky or like light color, and ghosts come in all different things. That's another thing. Ghost,
Yeah.
a lot of times I've had ghosts that come in literally as black pillars of smoke. And I was like, what are
Hmm.
you doing in my bedroom? What did I
Yeah.
do? you know? Then I found out they were my family. So but ghosts are a lot of time. I have seen ghosts, several people. I was very grateful that I see them outside of my house. The one person who passed, who we bought her house from, she died. The landslide house, actually. She
Mm.
died before, obviously, and then a year later we ended up buying it. And
Hmm.
I saw her, and I always told her because I knew she died in the house, and
Hmm.
I told her, I was like, I have, you are welcome. This is your house. I kept all
Yeah.
her stuff. I kept her name up on this life preserver.
Mm.
Yeah, like I kept it that she is part of it. Like we are just co-owners, you know what I'm saying? And just like
Hmm.
that's very important to me. And so I'm like kind of like all are welcome, especially as long as she allows it, welcome. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All beings of light. I always make sure to say that because I don't want density. Like I'm not working through anybody else's stuff. I have too much of my own stuff. So I always say all beings of light. Okay. And
Mm.
I just mean that in the sense of light,
Mm.
instead
Okay.
of density, that type of
Yeah.
light. So and light also being like our auric field. So the how they always show it is that when you actually see it. So I a long time ago I was outside in my hammock, and all of a sudden I was with my kid. My kid was young. Both of my kids were young, but I was with my son, I believe. And all of a sudden I saw her out on my balcony. It was like it's kind of like a 3-story, and I saw her on my balcony, and I was like, all I thought was, oh, thank God I'm not inside my house. You respected my
Yeah.
boundaries. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like I could see you no problem. Thank you for not showing up at the foot of my bed. Cause
Yeah.
that's when I say no. Cause which is semi happened, but I was like, no, I can't. Unless it's someone I love. You
Oh,
know what
sure.
I'm
That's
saying?
different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally
So
different.
when you saw her, did you see her as an outline, as a column of something, or like a full body, like fully herself?
So I never see their feet. Okay. They're always hovering. So they're
Okay.
open. And if you think about it, ghosts, they never show like the bottom. Like if it is the bottom, it's wavy for her feet, unless it's like
Yeah.
Charlie Brown or something. And so it's just like she had, so here's the kicker. I had
Okay.
no idea what she looked like no idea. And
Mm.
she showed herself as this outline, and then everything was more misty inside,
Hmm.
but she showed her hair. She had white hair, and it was very flowing, and it was long. It was like down,
Mm.
like almost the belly. And I remember that very, very strong feature. And then you almost see like a halo, but it's around the body. So it's not just around the
Mm.
top of the head. And
Yeah.
then I think, oh, she was wearing something long, like it was a dress. That's what it looked like. Just kind of like a wavy kind of like dress. And I remember my friend telling me, she's like, you just described her. I was like, what? And she's
Oh,
like, she
really?
had long white hair. She would a lot of times put it in braids. And she
Mm.
always would wear like a long flowing thing, like sometimes wear a long flowing thing like that. And she talked all about her. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's super cool. But
It's
another
amazing.
time I saw my healer friend. And
Mm.
that was really fascinating because I was actually getting a healing by somebody he trained before he died,
Mm.
and trained in healing and stuff like that. And I went through a death myself. I was in the hospital. I didn't know my healer guy died. And I was in the hospital because I was dying and nobody could figure out why. And my heart was really, instead of really fast, it was super, super slow.
Mm.
And they were really worried about that. But they couldn't figure out what was going on. And I died. I basically had my own death, and I lost like 15. This is where I couldn't afford to lose weight. And I lost like
Mm.
15, 20 pounds in 3 days at 2 to 3 days. It was something insane. I mean, my pants would like, I tried to put my pants back on and they would just fall. And it was just gross. Like I couldn't even sit barely. Like I lost
Yeah.
all this like I don't know, like meat, the body meat.
Yeah.
Like I literally was dying. Anyway, it took me, I was in bed for 3 months of like, I guess this was like 2009, I guess, or something like that. And I was in bed of just being like, I don't know how to live. I don't, and then I find out he died. And it was just like this whole thing. But anyway, so then like around, after I was in the hospital, I got, Steve drove me to, my husband drove me to the healing, the chiropractor. It was a whole, they did a whole bunch of different stuff. And to this other guy who he trained. And this guy was working on me, and he was also he was very psychic. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't a practicing psychic, but he was psychic.
Right.
And they were working on me. And all of a sudden I felt my whole body light up, and they were just energetically working on me
Yeah.
and body wise. And I remember seeing Dr. Vidmar, this is who the doctor was, seeing him, and he was right
Mm.
by my head. And
Mm.
I started crying, and I'm trying to say, oh my God, I see him, but like no words are coming out my mouth. And so I'm like, I just like pure awe. And it was the same thing. It was that white profile. It's just like a kind of like a, like, you know, on those Halloween costumes, how they draw those stick figures and they light it
Yeah.
up with like those, you know, you dress in a black suit and then you do a
Yeah.
stick figure with light ups. That's kind of like what it looked like, but it's white and misty all around, like inside
Mm-hmm.
and also outside of them. So they're kind of like see-through in a way.
Yeah.
But I knew it was him. You just know, like you just know who it is, you know.
Yeah.
And then he was very short, and I'm like
Mm.
so short. And then I was like, oh well, maybe when he left, I think he was trying to be inconspicuous first of all.
Mm.
And he was, and sometimes when people, let's say if they're in a wheelchair or stuff like that, like when I do readings, when they show themselves, they will show themselves very short. And then people, I'll be like, were they short? And they're like, no, they're really tall. And I'm like, of course they were. And then I'm like, were they in a wheelchair? And they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, well, that's because they're sitting, them showing themselves, you
That's
know.
right.
Like that. Yeah. And he was just like super short. And he was just, but he was so funny. He wouldn't pay attention to me. I was like, thanks a lot. Like, I really care about you. He was so adamant on doing his job. And he was
Mm.
working through them, the two people that were working
Yeah.
on me. And I remember I was like, oh my God, he's going to totally help me. Oh my God, he didn't really leave. Thank you, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. And I just remember, and he walked around the table and he was like behind the person who was working on me. And he was
Mm.
just like, I could tell he was funneling information and energy
Yeah.
and he was such a fabulous, I mean, he was so good at his craft. Like
Yeah.
I love him. So Dr. Vidmar, I love you. Thank you. Thank you
That's a
for joining
lovely
our
story.
podcast.
I really love that story.
Ah,
And so wow, I could go in like 15 different
I
directions.
know, go ahead.
Well, one is like you know, you talked about seeing people at one point on my end of the screen, that you froze or chopped up just a little bit, and you were saying that we don't see. The part I heard is we don't see people's feet, and I didn't know if there was an explanation or if that's just the phenomenon. For some reason, we just don't see their feet.
I don't know why we don't see their feet. I
Yeah.
think because they're not grounded. So they're not uh,
Mm.
on this world. It's kind of like in angels, you never see their feet. Same thing.
Hmm.
So it's like that hovering effect.
Mm-hmm.
And they just, because like even when I saw the person who owned our house, Diana,
Yeah.
I only saw her kind of like from the knees up, like the shins up. Like I
Yeah.
didn't really see anything lower, and it was so weird. And
Yeah.
it's not like your
It,
brain finds that out. It's not like, hey, where are your feet? It
yeah.
almost feels like they're extended, like they're not your brain. It's so fascinating because your brain turns, it almost like fills it in
Mm.
for you as like, oh, well, they're a ghost. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't be like, oh, something's missing here. It's like almost like if
Right.
you see a painting and you like fill it in and you're like, wait a
Yeah.
second, that's there. It's
Yeah.
like that.
Interesting. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I feel like from what I've heard, um, it seems like a very universal experience. Like, and like, there's just no feet, you know, they're hovering or
Have
something
you
like that.
seen ghosts?
Well, well, when I was a small child, we lived in North Carolina on the Outer Banks, and my mom bought a tiny little house. So I was probably like 3 or 4, and my sister was So I was probably 3 because my sister wasn't born yet. And the house, inside the house, the person who owned it had passed away in the house. And there was one room I remember in particular that had a unique feel to it. And I remember, I think I was taking a nap up there, and I have a small child recollection of seeing a white figure kind of coming through the door and then going into what turned out to be kind of like the attic crawl space. And there were a lot of very active things that my mom doesn't make up stories. And so she was, my dad was a fisherman, and he was out to sea, which sounds like something someone said in the 1850s. My dad was a
No, it
fisherman.
sounds Alaskan, actually.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, actually, you're right. So it was like he was a commercial fisherman, so he was out for 3 months at a time. So I was asleep on the couch next to her. My sister, my mom was pregnant with my sister, and my mom's, the only pet we had was a cat, was right there. We were all in the living room because it was the only room that was heated, and there was a doorway to the hallway off of the living room, and it had an old crusty doorknob that took a lot of energy to turn. It wasn't stuck. It just was, you really had to crank on it to get it to move. And so she was doing something quiet, maybe reading, and out of the corner of her eye, she sees that doorknob effortlessly just turn, and then the door just opens to the hallway. And so we always heard footsteps going up and down the stairs and things like that. So that was the first house I lived in. That was literally the first house I lived in.
Was she scared?
I think I think that freaked her out a little bit. My mom is not one who's necessarily a non-believer, who's like, that can't be it. But I think for a while, she actually thought there was someone who was sneaking around, like getting into the house. And that freaked her out more than the actual ghost. I think having a spirit in the house, she's like, oh, thank God. this isn't a human. I can deal with this. Like, you know,
right.
But, and I had other situations that were, and I was so young, it's hard to know what felt like a dream and what was a memory of seeing things outside the house floating around. In my house, when I moved to Virginia, I didn't see a whole lot. I saw a lot of orbs, which I think would be an excellent segue into
Yes.
but my friend, who his family, I believe, is more psychic by a good country mile than me. He and I were watching TV one night late. We were staying up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had just dozed off. And next to the TV was a doorway that was open, and he saw a woman just walk by, who was not my mom, and she did not go up the stairs or out the front door, and that was it. And so that was a house that
What did he
had a lot.
say?
He's like, dude, did you see that? And I'm like, I just nodded off. And he's like, I was like, what? And he was just like, oh, I saw your ghost. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, no, I thought it was your mom, but like, she was much older than your mom. She had white hair, and she just walked slowly right by, looking straight ahead. And he woke up in another room that was originally ended up being my dad's studio, and waking up to someone saying his name in the corner. And he was like, he thought it was me playing
Wow.
a trick on him, and he sits up in bed, turns on the light, and then he realizes it was coming from a corner of the room where there was no door or anything. And so and being a family that saw a good number of things, but that kind of put him on edge. He didn't like to sleep in that room after that. But
I
yeah,
think, but like to me, when that happens, I love, so you told a couple key things that give
yeah,
me like psychic flags, which
yeah,
are a good thing.
yeah,
That I love that you said that you were dozing off. So
yeah.
this, to me, this energy, even though it's your house, it's very much of that had to be showed for him, and
Mm,
almost him uh individually, you know what I'm
hmm,
saying? And that it was also his name. So they were probably trying to get his attention, not necessarily you justifying that. You know
hmm,
what I'm saying? Because if it was both of you, then you'd be like, oh yeah, da 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 da. Like it's so common. And it's just like, no, that was really for him, like for
hmm.
him,
Yeah,
in
the timing felt pretty impeccable. And then in the house I live now, my partner and I were watching TV, um, and I think it was probably in the springtime, and it was, as I mentioned to you in talking about this earlier, it was right not that long after my grandmother passed,
Mhm.
and we were the way our house is set up. It's a twin row home in Philadelphia, so everything's very long. The house is very long, so it's our living room, then our dining room, then our kitchen.
Mhm.
You can see from one to all the way to the other. And we had all the lights turned off, and we saw clearly what looked like, at first I always thought it was maybe the light, just kind of a car going by, but behind our TV there was a silhouette of a person, clear as day. And I leaned to one side and was just like, who is that? Like someone had just walked in, but they acted like they knew us or something. Um and it was interesting because it was misty, like you said, and my eye had trouble focusing on the inside of them. It felt like the muscles in my eyes were doing this, trying to grasp onto something that was much more ethereal than us, right?
Yes.
And then it just kind of faded away, and I was leaning over, and the funny thing is, like, no goosebumps, not like in the movies where like, oh, I felt something. I turned to my partner who's on the other side of the TV looking in the same direction, and I was like, did you see that? And she explained the exact same, described the exact same thing. And but she saw it come in, and she said it looked like someone who's trying to be discreet, who kind of like walking into a room where um they, like, you walk into a room and you don't realize people are there, like, oh, excuse me, sorry, and kind of slinked in. Our cat didn't react, and there wasn't like in the movies there where the cat like puffs up, and the cat was just like, oh, your guys are finally seeing this.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
It was like the most like normal thing I could imagine experiencing, except for it was inexplicable. And we share one wall with a neighbor, and we ended up telling him, and he's like, oh yeah, I've seen that. He's like, I've seen it too. and
I love
so
this.
and so that's, as we talk about, like, you know my journey from being so, like, being kind of tied in the scientific world, and then also knowing, because I've seen it with my own eyes and
Mhm.
experienced things throughout my life, there's things that science cannot yet explain. That's what I'd like to put it.
Yes.
Science is catching up. And it wasn't just me in that moment, right? There was like someone who also is sober of mind, who we, without, like, to the minute detail, we're able to explain or describe the exact same situation the exact same way. And so that was very, very validating, very affirming.
Yes.
Um, and
And
then
that's
the
so
week,
rare.
yeah, I mean, is it? I don't know. It's like, is
It's
it pretty rare to?
super rare to have two people at the same time see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then when my partner was away during the summer, I saw this little shadow walk around my living room, and I was like, I can't be saying this. This is. But I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like sit with it and just see, and like no scary feelings, nothing felt out of place. And then it moved along the wall, and then got a little closer, and then got up on the chair, and it was just at the end of the couch, just sitting there, and it looked like it was like it, an absence of light this big, and had a very strong, it was like, well, felt like a little animal, like it could have been a kid, maybe, I don't know, like it was just small, but I would say it was like about this big. And then I couldn't take it any longer, and when I looked at it, it wasn't there, but it was, I just kind of traced it through with my peripheral vision. And so, living in Baltimore, I had a similar thing of shadows moving around when there was no lights anywhere.
Yes.
And so that was, but my dog, she would like look at it. I'm like, oh, you're seeing it too. So I would just talk to it. I was like, if you're trying to be sneaky, you're doing a terrible job. But hey, we're all getting along here. And so that
Did you
was,
ever get a feeling of why it was there?
um, no. No, this might be cut out of the podcast, but when I moved into my apartment in Baltimore,
Mhm.
there's nothing in the house when we moved in, except for on the wall of my bedroom, there was a little sculpture of an angel. I don't know if there was a cross on it. And I was like, I'm not religious. Let me take this down. And I just paused, and my partner looked at me like, we've watched enough movies. We'll be like, no, we're just going to leave this up here. We're just going to leave this up here. Like, it felt like, I was like, no. And I left the house. And when I left the house, I left it on the wall. But there's nothing that felt, in terms of like energy or entities, there's nothing that felt heavy or hard. And
It
I
was
did
just showing
sleep.
up.
Yeah, and I did sleepwalk a lot in that house though. And sleepwalking runs my mom's side of the family.
Mhm.
Her brother did it when he was younger. I didn't, to my knowledge, do it when I was a kid, but it's like sleep deprivation and a little bit of stress. I started doing it in my 20s, and then I don't know if I've done it since,
Wow.
but so I don't. I mean, that could just be purely physiological, but it was odd. I would wake up with bruises on my legs that I couldn't explain, and then I would, uh, I I would have. I don't know if this is part of the podcast, but I would have waking dreams where I would be having a dream that was very, very vivid, but I would be sleeping, and while I was dreaming, my eyes were open. So
Mhm.
I'm filling the room with
Yep.
my thoughts, and then something loud or something would happen, and I would jump into action in the dream and terrify the people sleeping next to me.
So
So I don't know if this fits this podcast at all. That's just EO's sleep
uh,
disorder, but
no,
that was just a funny thing. I don't know how I got on this tangent. Sorry, I don't know.
no, this is fascinating to me. It's especially fascinating that you had it, that you're sleepwalking when you're an adult. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? To
I think I
me,
pushed my body and my brain to a place to towards its edge, and I was there for a while, and then I think that to me is how I kind of justify, not justify, but kind of like wrap my mind around like why I was there, and it hasn't happened since, kind of.
but did it not happen since because you're now in a different place?
I think I'm it hasn't, because it happened in multiple places. So
Oh, it did. Okay.
my partner's house in Philadelphia, when we moved in together after grad
Yes.
school, back in together, I had a few of those moments, and I just get more sleep. I mean, I was like running on 3 hours of sleep like for way too long,
Wow.
and um, but
I think that you were jumping the veil. That's what I think.
oh
I
really?
think that you were, yes, I think that you were being, your highest self was probably using the lack of sleep to be able to do this. I
Mm,
feel like it's kind of like a, like how we're just talking about, why
yeah,
ghosts, they jump the veil. It's like being
yeah,
able to like move the body into the
yeah,
energy that it really is. That's why when people cross over, it's just like we really understand that the who we are is only a tiny percent, meaning the body is only a
yeah,
tiny percent who we really are. You know what I'm saying? Because we're
yeah.
so gigantic. Oh, don't let me forget to tell you about. Oh wait, I actually have to tell you right now. So,
Okay.
because I know I will forget.
Yeah,
When you said where are we about the ghosts and the like, are we just like all as
yeah,
one? Or da 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 da.
yeah.
I did get very clearly, which I didn't know this, but I did get that you are still your spark. They showed me a
Mm,
light. So you're like a spark of light, and that's in the chest center. So
mm.
you are this outline. The outline just kind of shows you of like where you've been. You know how they do
Oh
bodies
yeah,
like showing when they're dead? It's
yeah,
kind of like
yeah,
that. Your chalk outline of just
yeah,
like what you were, but you're
yeah,
so big and so expansive. So it's only really, it's not that we're showing each other like, look at my ghost. Oh, look at my ghost looks just
yeah,
like your ghost. It's
yeah,
not really that, because that's it. When we're beyond, it doesn't matter. But when we enter, they almost say it's like kind of getting caught in sheets. When you're
mm,
crossing the veil, you're
yeah,
crossing a sheet, so it's just like
yeah,
you're in a duvet sheet, a duvet comforter or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Like that. Of
Okay.
like just kind of like it's just almost like you're caught in cobwebs. That's what they keep on
Yeah,
showing. They're showing it in such a cartoon way, but it's that of like being able to kind of like you're just crossing a realm. So you kind of get
yeah,
you know what I'm
yeah.
saying? In that way. Um,
Okay.
you have a spark they show inside of you. So you are still you,
Yeah.
but more on a soul level.
Okay.
But like if you're coming to other people, let's say when I die and I become, my ghostly self, and my ghostly self shows up, in the
Hmm.
physical, I am, for them to recognize me, I have to show up as Vanessa the personality. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? For them to understand who I am. So
Hmm.
it's just that my soul is way bigger. And it's like that goes into the like past lifetimes and what are those, and how I call it parallel lives, and how
Yeah.
I really believe we're living multidimensional lives,
Yeah.
in one moment. But
Yeah. I
a
can't wait to get into
ghost,
that. I have a whole line of
I
questioning about
know,
that.
right? Same here. But
Yeah.
I feel like where the ghost is just like they
Yeah.
just keep on showing the spark, and that's almost like the soul, maybe. So it's
Okay.
like the soul of remembrance. They keep on saying it's like
Mm.
why we light a candle, in remembrance
Mm.
of that's what they're showing, of like keeping that alive, of like, it doesn't matter if the candle goes out in your
Yeah.
memory, you know, like
Yeah.
before every session, I either light a candle or else online I have a candle lit, you know what I'm saying? Or
Mm,
I light it in my mind. So I'm
mhm.
bringing in that presence of that awareness.